This is going to be a very special evening. We're very, very pleased about this. So let me ask, how many of you took piano lessons? Oh my goodness! Look at this! How many took the John Thompson series? Look at this! Wow!
You're in great company with Billy Joel.
That's fantastic. The fascinating thing is everybody took them in a different place. I took mine in Pensacola Christian in Florida. Ann took hers in Indiana. Who was it who just told me they took theirs in New York? So anyway, we're all from a different state as far as that. And then this morning, after 50 years being married, I learned something new about my husband, Scott. He lived in Cali, Colombia, whenever he was in junior high school. And guess what? He took piano lessons on the John Thompson series in Colombia. So that's why I guess I'm not as surprised to find out that this one, this advanced one, is printed in Japanese. So the music, of course, is universal, but the words are in Japanese. Wow. So anyway, we are tickled to have the whole family here. I was just ecstatic years ago to find out that John Thompson had a home on Grand Lake, and it's Pine Eyrie. You all pass it every time you go past the cabin court. It's right across from the meadow. And so it's been in their family for 5 generations now. And the 5th generation may appear with us, but we have 3 here. Do we have the 5th generation?
She's here.
Oh, we do? Oh, there she is. So here we go. I'm going to turn it over to Tim.
Use this one? Well, first of all, we'd like to thank the Grand Lake Historical Society and thank all of you for coming out tonight. Hopefully you enjoy the next 3.5 hours. The reason I said 3.5 hours is anything under that you'll feel like you got a deal. So, anyway, I thought we'd start with some introductions just so you know the Thompson family here at Grand Lake. So the first generation who came to Grand Lake was Art Bob and I's grandfather, John and Loretta Thompson. They purchased our cabin. It was the first cabin built in our cove. They purchased it in 1937 in August. And the actual cabin was a hunting and fishing cabin, and it was built around 1906. So they made some additions to it along the way, added some bathrooms, added the kitchen, the outhouse went away, and it's changed over the years. And we're thankful for that. Then our father inherited the property along with his brother Jack Thompson. And Jack Thompson bought some property down in Florida and sold his half to our father, who was Dr. Les Thompson. And then the 3rd generation is, so those first 2 generations, they're all gone, and we're next in line. And I've got my brother, Dr. Bob Thompson, here, along with probably a lot of folks. I see the Rempels here. That 3rd generation was Bob Thompson and Sue Thompson Rempel, along with myself, and my wife is not here, Trish. And then Bob, I'll have you introduce the 4th generation.
So I'm very proud of the 4th generation.
We can't hear.
Is that good enough? And I can't believe that I'm in any way responsible for these guys, but they're the best. And we've got Nicholas and Alexander. And we've got the newest edition, who just arrived 6 months ago.
Put it on your chin.
Is that better?
Better.
Okay. The 4th generation, again, Nicholas Thompson, who is here, his wife Margot, and the 6-month-old is Theodora Scott Thompson, and she's named after Scott Rempel, is her middle name. And Leslie Thompson is my brother Tim Thompson's daughter.
And where is she?
Right over here.
Oh, yes, she's right.
Just look for the movie star sunglasses. You can't miss.
All right, we're going to go through these fairly quickly unless you want to know more. Our cabin is right across from what was the old school on Carnes Avenue, and the cabin, as you heard, was named Pine Eyrie. Does anybody know what an eyrie is? It's a raptor or eagle's bird of prey, their nest. So that sounds kind of aggressive. All right, John Thompson. So he was did two things really well, other than being a great dad, according to our father. He wrote music books, and he was also a photographer. And he was kind of nicknamed Shutterbug because he bothered everybody by taking pictures all the time. And kind of annoyed the family when he was doing that. But I think now we've benefited by it. He was born in Williamstown, Pennsylvania in 1889. He was an accomplished pianist at the age of 5. He gained national attention when he was 12. He toured Europe when he was 16. He wrote books. He ended up in Philadelphia. Then they moved from Philadelphia to Kansas City. They found our property in Grand Lake when my father went to camp near Grand Lake, and he took a day trip and drove up around Grand Lake and fell in love with it. You'll also note that our neighbors at the time were from Lincoln, Nebraska, and from San Antonio, Texas. So can anybody else guess why you'd be interested in that house? Can anybody guess?
To get out of the heat.
To get out of the heat. There was no air conditioning in the late 30s. So there was a huge draw from people from the Midwest. That's why you see so many older families from Texas with the prize, getting out of that heat in Texas and getting a home on Grand Lake. So I had a lot of fun looking at the cars. It was a pretty unbelievable drive to get here. It was a 4 or 5 day trip from Kansas City to get here, and they had to drive on I-70. So I've got $10 here for the first 3 guesses. First guess, when was I-70 completed?
1970.
We already knew. Jason does not get the $10. It was actually 1970. So when we used to come out here with the family, they were constructing I-70, and we would drive on the old highway. It was a divided highway, 1 lane each direction, and quite dangerous. In addition, you know, the cars would overheat. A lot of cars didn't have air conditioning. I mean, we remember going out there without air conditioning. So it was quite an adventure getting out here to Colorado and then up over the Continental Divide to Grand Lake.
So this is your family?
Yes.
Picture.
Yeah, so this is, John Thompson is the gentleman on the far right, although they do look like a mafia group. They're in front of the house. Now, you'll also notice when we go through these pictures, a lot of the fun is looking at how people dressed at the time. It looked like they were going to church. They had ties on and brooches and all kinds of stuff. So here you can see some of the cars that made it over the pass. That bottom photograph is our father on the left. And one of his friends who lived by the channel, who ended up dying in a crash during World War II. He was a pilot, and that's getting the Model A now. Our father used to tell us when they went up over Berthoud Pass, and Scally can tell us if this is true. He said they used to cut branches off of trees and drag them behind the cars so their brakes wouldn't go out.
Well, that logs, they had logs on them.
So that's true?
Yeah.
Kim, who was the friend who lived on the channel in the picture?
That was
Billy Bauer.
Bill Bauer, and he died in a training exercise as a pilot. And this is downtown Grand Lake. You know, it's largely unchanged. We have so much respect for the people in Grand Lake that run retail operations. It's so difficult. It's such a short season. But you can see the buildings haven't changed much. Only the cars and the dirt roads, right? But you can see the names of a lot of those locations have changed. And John's Shoe Shop, unfortunately, is closed. And there you go, Humphreys. And there's Zix. Now, Bob can tell you a little bit about Zix in the end of the summer, what we used to do. Bob, unless you want me to cover it. All right, so...
This is the sagebrush, everybody.
So that's the sagebrush now, but Ray Zick from Denver used to run the grocery store. And we used to charge all summer long. We would never get billed. And we'd get a slip of paper, and they would fill it out each time we went in there. And then about a day or two before you left, at the end of the summer, because we were summer people, we were not winterized, you went to the Zix. You said, we're going to be leaving in 2 days. They would tally up your bill, and then you would get your bill at the end of the summer. They'd total it up, and you'd get billed. I'm sure you all, Aaron, you remember it, right? And that's the postmaster. John liked to play with photography. He's floating above the post office. Now, when we were growing up, on the left there was a Swedish pancake house with delicious lingonberries. And then there was the post office in the middle, and now that's the Never Summer building. We used to have fun. Occasionally, when we were young, our arms would fit in the boxes and they had glass fronts, and we would go to the channel and we would get suckers that fishermen had caught, and we'd reach in the box so we could slide them into the fronts. They'd be staring out the window. And one time they stacked mail on a sucker for about a month until I think the odor got to the postmaster.
Excuse me, I'd like to interject. He said we, that was him.
And this is Rustic Stables. So Rustic Stables was where the hub is now. And we had, as you know, sombrero when you came into town, and we had this. It was very much of a horse culture when we were here. But once the stables closed, you don't see the horses nearly as much, obviously, as you used to when we had 2 of these in town. So does anybody know? So the Eslick Motor Court, behind it, they're refurbishing. Probably the Historical Society is refurbishing the general store. I'm almost certain this is a photograph from that general store when they're in there. So as you kind of do the layout internally of that store, you might want to take a look at this photograph and see how close you are to what that store really is. It's really cool that that's being restored. So if you've seen the motor court, it's right back behind it. It's really cool. So definitely worth a visit. Any questions on that one?
That's Leonard Zick.
Yeah.
Is that Leonard Zick?
Yeah.
And were they originally in the corner store that was Zick's, or were they in that small store?
I don't remember, but that's Leonard.
All right, and there's the Kaufman House. One thing we have done with photographs, and also, I was going to bore you, and Bob and I talked about it, we weren't going to bore you with movies, but we've got a bunch of movies from the 30s and 40s. The Kaufman House has those along with all these photographs. So these are pictures of pictures that you're seeing tonight, so the quality isn't as good as the originals. So that's the old school across the street from our house.
That's the Living Word Church next to Trinity. Right.
And that's what the original shore looked like, so that would be where the boat rental is now. And then the yacht club, and you can see there's no boat service to the right. After this, Lyle Killian came, built the boat service to the right of the yacht club. Does anybody know what this is from? Not the lodge. Not Sombrero.
Marina?
Okay, I'm going to give you one more clue. You ready for another clue? The Pinecone Inn. So John Thompson was here for the Pinecone Inn when it burned. It was September 26th, 1943, when it caught on fire and burned, and he happened to be up here when it did burn, so he got photographs.
Where's the Pinecone Inn?
So that vacant property at the end of town on the right, when you drive in at the very end of town, that's where the Pinecone Inn was.
Charlie's parking lot.
Charlie's parking lot. And for a long time, those chimneys stood. There's some boat service work going on. There's the Lemon Lodge Beach. So this is how they used to launch boats. So the one thing Bob and I talked about, the passions that both of us have as a result of our parents and our grandfather. I have a real passion and interest in sailing. I really love it. And so I go through and look at this stuff. This is what kind of inspired us growing up, was watching the older folks sailing their boats. So you can see they used to lower the boats on almost like a train track into the water, and you can see that car on the right that they would lower them backwards.
This is Grand Lake Marina.
Yeah, this was before the marina was really completed. So there's just some day sailing heading out in the harbor, all kinds of different boats before we went with one design. That's the Jigger, which was a boat that my dad won a cup when he was 17. So this is an e-boat. So one of the things, they're still sail e-boats today. They've been modified a little bit. And one of the really cool things back in the day with e-boats, you can see that board, the big board hanging down from the bottom. There's one on each side of the boats. And one of the most fun things to do when you used to sail, now they have hiking straps that you hook your ankles in and lean back over the boat. but you used to get to ride the leeboard when the boat tipped to the side. And so you can see the lady standing in that picture to the right. It looks like she's getting ready to stand on that leeboard. So that was a lot of fun. So that was I believe, my father's boat right there. He sailed for a while with a knee, but his shoulder kept popping out, and it was just too much. So he had to give it up. So here's some sailboat races on Grand Lake. There's more sailboat races on Grand Lake. That's my father. And so my grandfather was called Shutterbug for a reason. He made everybody pose for pictures. I'm sure he had to pose for that one. So it doesn't always go well when you're sailing on Grand Lake. The weather's always variable. So here you can see a boat over. Bob and I, when we were kids, we used to go over to the public docks. We figured we could get girls. We'd tip over. We'd have sack lunches. We'd eat with the boat tipped over. We'd finish the sandwiches, but we never got girls. And there's my dad's 17. So there's a lot more than just sailing, obviously, on Grand Lake. We all like to do that. This is the old Chris Craft. Most of the Chris Crafts have been replaced by fiberglass, unfortunately. But Bob and I loved the styling on the old Chris Crafts. There was nothing quite like them. And you can see people, a lot of other ways to get out on the lake: motorboat, rowboat, get a lot of friends on the dock, go skiing. That's George Peak from the east end of the lake, and he's water skiing on the right, and that's an aquaplane on the left. And that was one of the most traumatic experiences I ever had. They showed me how to ride on an aquaplane, but they didn't say when it tips over to let go of the rope. And so I was never much of a skier or an aquaplane. So that's the Mickey. So before Lyle Killian built the marina, and he had these big Chris Crafts that toured the lake. The Mickey was the boat that took people around the lake and showed them the lake, and I'll show you the lady who piloted that. Scally, you probably haven't seen the Mickey in a while.
Well, there was prior to Killian was Lou Millinger.
Yep.
And Lou Millinger was the daughter of Captain McCarthy that started the whole marina or trips around the lake and rental boats and stuff. And Lou Millinger ran it for many years. I worked for her in 1946 up the whole summer.
And I've got a picture of Louise Millinger later in this.
That's Lou.
So one of the things we really enjoyed, what Grand Lake is really about is the people and getting together with friends. So we built, with the neighbor next door, Lou Fight, our father built that barbecue pit that you see on the right. The unique thing about it is the chimney is actually built in the Fight's yard, and the seating is built in our yard. Fortunately, we got along with the Fights, and we get along really well with the Morals who live next to us now. And that's a picnic table. We picnic outside a lot. That's, different meals, getting together with family up at Grand Lake is always great. So that's our house on the left, and that's at the Peak House up in the upper right, having dinner and obviously hanging with friends. So kind of you saw sailing is kind of my passion, still is my passion and interest. My brother Bob is quite different now. He doesn't quite hike in the style that you see here, but you see the beautiful hats, the cowboy boots, the nice sweaters. They certainly dressed differently when they went out in the wilderness in style. That's John Thompson on the left hiking in a tie, somebody else hiking in a tie. And then obviously Adams Falls. Everybody in this room's been to Adams Falls, and we were there today, went out there. By the way, that's our mother and her mother. And then you can see it hasn't really changed much at the falls, other than there's not much water running down the falls today. And that's our mother again and her mother on the right. So fishing was a huge part of it. It's interesting, fishing is not nearly as big a deal as it was when we were younger. I don't know why. It seems like it's really fallen off, but growing up, there was a lot of fishing going on around us. Now you know why there are no fish. Now, Bob contends that this was actually a fishing trip in Montana, and he might be right, or Montana or Wyoming, Idaho. But this is back here, so either they did a great job with refrigeration, or they did bring them back on ice, and they had. But it was not unusual to have family fish fries down there and have friends and guests over. And that's Lou Fight, who lived next door. So remember when we had rain and chilly weather?
Yes.
So we went indoors. So we still play. We're still playing dominoes, Uno, any number of games at nighttime together as a family, and it's really important for us. So here you see John and Loretta playing chess. People reading, and then usually alcohol is never too far away. And so John Thompson built a studio so he could write his music in peace. And that studio, you can see they've got a record player there, and a lot of people are over visiting our father, listening to music on a record player. It's changed slightly with the addition. Nick has put a big screen TV in there, and we watched some of the World Cup matches, and I hate to say it, but the Kansas City Chiefs too. I'm sorry. Okay, so this was one thing that's really changed around Grand Lake, is the bridges. So this is on the east end. And as a kid, I remember it was treacherous. We used to go visit the peaks. Every spring, this would get wiped out, and they would put these logs together. There was no rhyme or reason, and you put your life in your own hands to get across the bridge. And now there's a beautiful bridge over there that you're safe and sound. This is on the west end. So no railings. You got to really be brave. And luckily, Scally and Annie are still here. They obviously made it over the bridge. And you can see somebody working on the bridge on the upper right. And then this actually, when this picture was taken, the water coming out of Grand Lake, that would be the Colorado River then. So you didn't have, at this point, you did not have Granby and Shadow Mountain Lake. John Thompson loved to take pictures of different views of Grand Lake. Just go real quick through these. Here's some views of people just enjoying the lake and the beautiful view. That's the oldest house on the lake. One thing Bob and I like to do, we would go to the post office when we were going to climb Shadow Mountain. And the Forest Service used to always put a husband-wife up on the fire lookout, up on the top of Shadow Mountain. And we would get the mail from the postmaster, and we would get to hike up Shadow Mountain and bring the mail to them, which was a lot of fun. We used to always climb Shadow Mountain. Probably every summer we did it multiple times.
Tim, what's the oldest cabin, back one?
This is the oldest house on the lake on the right. It's across the lake in kind of an unusual place. Scally, you want to add anything? I mean, everybody says it's the oldest. I don't know that I can confirm that it is.
Jay Adams built that about 1890.
1890?
And then Dudley Abbott, the Cooks had it, and then Dudley Abbott bought it after the war. Right.
But anyway, and they've done some recent work to it. All right, I talked about the horse culture. I'm going to go through this real quick, but with two stables in town, and before you had Shadow Mountain and Granby Reservoir, there were ranches there. And so you would have, Bob and I, when we were growing up, we would watch people ride their horses into town all the time. And there were hitching posts, and you'd see them pull into the stagecoach and tie up their horses and go in, and it was not unusual at the time. That's on the left is our mother, on the right is our father, when he was pretty young. Just different people on horses. All right. Anyway, we talked about the hiking and what people wore. Now, the most interesting picture here, there were a couple, that's mom and a friend. On the middle, we were a little puzzled when we looked at this. It almost looks like the rock at Lone Pine. But I can't believe they would have hiked up there dressed like that. That's the picture, right?
They probably did.
They probably did. Look at the shoes, the brooches. And then on the right, you can see the same thing with brooches and nice jackets and everything else. So, real quick, I just want to show you a couple profile pictures. John Thompson liked to take pictures. I think that's the gentleman that was working on the bridge on the left. That's Louise Mellinger, who used to run the Mickey. On the right, she looks very serious, like she's piloting the Mickey at the time. There are a couple of characters I don't know, but he liked to take them. Young man on a post. There's our mother on the left and a minor on the right. And there he made people pose for pictures. My father was never on a stagecoach, but there he is on the left. And then hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park, you can see the neat little signs they used to put up then. And this is a hike to Cascade Falls. And you can see this is Fairview Curve in Rocky Mountain National Park and up in the tundra. And this is on the back side, so this would be over on the east side. And then Bear Lake, and then there's it's Little
Matterhorn.
Yeah, Little Matterhorn, and it's over there next to Lake Helene and Two Rivers East on the east side. Bob and I, hopefully at some point, can hike over there. It looks awful pretty. All right, so I believe this is correct. So this picture, I believe, is heading along Granby. The reservoir would actually be to your right here, if I'm right. I may not be right. And then this picture, which I'm sorry, the focus was poor on my phone, but this is before they filled in Shadow Mountain. This was a picture taken from the lodge, and it shows what the area looks like before they filled it with water. I've got better pictures of that. But anyway, that's work on the dam at the end of Shadow Mountain. So real quick, so how Grand Lake impacted Bob and I. The big word I think that we feel is continuity. It's something that happens. It's kind of a rhythm. We end up here. To me, it's lifelong friends. It's sailing, connection to the past, the beauty and mystery of the mountains, Grand Lake and Grand County. And for Bob, it's hiking. If anybody's followed him on Facebook, a phenomenal photographer. Bob loves nature. He's always researching and trying to learn. Solitude and reflection, kind of gratefulness and awe, and then it's a family place. You can see it now, especially with Teddy, our newest Thompson. It's just an absolute thrill to have all the family together, and obviously my daughter Leslie with us. And it's all thanks to a decision made by John and Loretta Thompson in 1937. So that's it. I'm going to turn it over to the boys.
There's a few other things, Tim. I'll say that what Tim skipped over is a lot of his own childhood and adolescence in Grand Lake, which included a lot of capers and shenanigans.
I can say.
Karen Fry has some stories. I think my dad has some stories. I'll start with a very light one, which is that I remember hearing that you used to work up at the Alpine Visitor Center. And he would go out and he'd collect rocks from the parking lot and he'd bring them in and he'd sell them as genuine rock. People could literally collect them for free on the parking lot. I don't think any of that revenue made it to the national park system. Dad, I'm going to hand this over to you just because I think there's a little,
If I could have the lights up, please, a little bit. I don't have any audio visuals, so you're going to have to rely on your imaginations here a little bit. I first came up here 75 years ago at 5 weeks of age, and supposedly this is the apocryphal story we all have, that they put us in a drawer somewhere. That's kind of how I started things here. We took an annual trek from Kansas City, Missouri. That's where I was actually born in Omaha, but we were raised in Kansas City. You might think that driving across Kansas would be dreadful coming to Colorado. Well, you'd be right. Because it was a pretty hot, dreadful trip, but we did find some points of attraction along the way. The world's largest prairie dog, I think you boys remember. It turned out, after years of reflection, it was a giant cement prairie dog. We didn't realize that at the time. We stayed at the Big Chief Motel in Colby, Kansas, which was a Best Western. We had individually wrapped bars of soap, which was a true luxury for us at the time. We ate world-famous fried chicken in Junction City at Cohen's famous chicken house. So it was a great trip across Kansas. The first view of the mountains we all remember coming in from Kansas and how thrilled we were to see it. As soon as we'd arrived in Grand Lake, I remember Dad going down to the Chris Craft. My father was 6'4", a pretty imposing gentleman, but a wonderful gentleman. He practiced internal medicine in Kansas City, Missouri. During World War II, he was a PT boat commander. It's interesting that he got the job as a PT boat commander because he had small boat handling experience, which he acquired here at Grand Lake on a Chris craft. So he trained at Melville, Rhode Island. Every year we read a beautiful letter that he wrote to the Kansas City Star when the troops liberated the Philippines, and Dad wrote an account of that was published in the Kansas City Star that we read every year. He took great pride in his naval service, and the Chris craft was his favorite. As soon as we came to the lake, that was the first thing we would do. Again, he did lose his dear friend Billy Bauer in a training accident, so we all think of him often. And there are many pictures of him with Billy Bauer. He'd take us out to a special spot in the Chris craft on Grand Lake where we know why it's called Shadow Mountain. It was also at one time called Echo Mountain. And you make a sound at that one part of the lake and it reverberates off the mountains, and we do that every year. So it was I'd like to talk a little bit about our neighbors. We were very fortunate to have Roscoe Hill. He was actually an incredible farmer in the state of Nebraska, raised turkeys. I went to Creighton University. When he passed, it was announced all over the state because he was a very notable farmer in Nebraska. His son was a professor of philosophy at the University of Denver. Tim's a graduate of the University of Denver. Roscoe Hill Jr. is quite a remarkable man. He wrote a book called The Road Less Traveled, which I recommend to you. It's about a pilgrimage he made across the state of Missouri. And it's very revealing about his philosophy. I'd like to say just a few things with my dad, who was an inspiration to me. I went into medicine because of my father. John Thompson's royalties put me through medical school, so he's had a profound influence not only in Grand Lake, but on my education as well. All the patients I talked to, just like in this room, took his book, so I had a foot forward when I talked to people about my grandfather. My father was an avid fisherman, and if you've seen a river runs through it, it's very reminiscent of my father. I used to follow him into Summerlin Park, and he was this majestic figure, the way he would throw a fly line. If you've ever watched an accomplished fly fisherman, and he was a big man, 6'4", but he threw the line with such grace that to watch him in the meadow was a thing to behold. And I loved to go with him. I'd swim in the meadow and he would fish, and I'd watch him drop a fly on a blade of grass and pop it off and see the trout hit. He used the conventional bamboo rod and a wicker creel, and actually learned from Lou Fight. Our grandfather wasn't particularly outdoorsy, but Dad took up all the camping and hiking and fly fishing and all that, so he was an inspiration to me. But I just want to say I adore Grand Lake. I adore the people of Grand Lake. Tim and I talk about it all the time. It's given us more than you can even imagine. As a child, it was like a magical trip every year to come out here. It still is after 75 years. So I'll put my sense on it.
How long would you stay when you came out?
So this was interesting. My dad was a physician in internal medicine, so he would send us up for the summer. And my mother, and she was a saint when I think back. After you have children, you realize she packed for 3 boys and took care of us during the summer. And Dad would come up for 3 weeks intermittently during the summer. So we got to spend our entire summer up here, basically. And it was a different time then. I think Mom was a very diligent mother, but we had a lot of freedom then. And Tim and I talk about it. You'd leave in the morning and she'd say, "We'll see you for dinner." And that's about what it was. And we did have an Arkansas Traveler, which was appropriately named the Haylaw. And we drove that around the lake constantly. But we would just be going fly fishing, hiking, whatever. And in my latter, I've been retired for a bit, so as Tim said, I've explored a lot of the hiking around here, Rocky Mountain National Park, Byers Peak Wilderness, Vasquez Peak Wilderness, Indian Peaks. I mean, we have such a wealth of opportunities around here to explore nature, and it's just it's a spectacular place to be, and I have immense gratitude for being exposed to it.
So I told my dad he had one job tonight, and that was to make sure that the shenanigan stories got told, and he receives a failing grade on it. But he did say something very sweet and earnest, and I've learned actually quite a bit from both of you about our family history, that some of which I've heard before and some of which I didn't, so it's I'm grateful to have gotten to just get a little more insight into your experience. So I will share another Tim story, which is I know it's hard to believe that this upstanding citizen of Grand Lake, Colorado, was once a ne'er-do-well. Allegedly, Tim hung fish from inside people's cars. Is this true?
On a stick shift.
Allegedly. Allegedly. So people would come out to their cars, they'd step inside their car. What's that smell? Allegedly, Tim Thompson was there. They have more stories than I do. Karen Fry may have to come up and tell some of these stories, but I'll switch gears here. So Nick and I are also beneficiaries of this really wonderful tradition and connection to Grand Lake. It's been an incredible gift, especially as adults. I think we've been reflecting on it. You know, as a child, you sort of take it for granted. It's just every summer you pack up the car and you drive, all the way across Kansas and you arrive in Grand Lake, and you spend your summers here. And as an adult now, I have, especially coming back here, I have a different appreciation for the different ways that this place has shaped me and those experiences. And I think that I have a similar relationship to it, to what you both expressed in terms of the friendships and like long-term family friendships. Like I came back after I spent 12 years in New York and had very few opportunities to come back to Grand Lake. Then I come back to Grand Lake and Karen Fry's right there with open arms. Bob Scott, who has known me my entire life, when he ran the lodge. So one of the things that Nick and I, that's really special about Nick and I, for us, not about, but is that we have family roots on both sides of our family here in Grand Lake. So there is John Thompson, the concert pianist, legendary, and I too have had many experiences. I worked in the arts in New York City for 12 years, and there's so many artists that I worked at a grant making organization, musicians that we gave grants to that are Guggenheim Award winners, MacArthur Award winners, fellows at all sorts of different prestigious organizations who had the same conversation that Donna had with all of you tonight. They took piano lessons on our great-grandfather's books. That's really a remarkable thing to have some sort of legacy and connection to. But then to also have this place to come to is really special. But on our mother's side, our grandparents, Pat and Warren Rimple, founded Shadowbrook. I'll say a little bit more about that in a little bit, but it's just extraordinary to have that kind of history with a place. So what I was about to say is that my grandfather, Warren Rimple, was the pastor at Trinity Church in the Pines for about 18 years and married many people in Grand Lake. And Bob planned and executed many of those weddings up at the lodge. So he and my grandfather were connected at the hip for a long time, and he's known both of us since we were babies. And
Can I just say something? My grandfather as well would use the term married as a verb when he was describing the act of presiding over a wedding. And as a 7-year-old, when your grandfather's coming to you, and you'd ask him what he did that weekend, and he'd say, well, I married so-and-so, you'd get really sad on behalf of your grandma. You're like, Grandpa, you already have a wife. What are you doing marrying some other woman? Because it was always the girl. That was always who he referred to. It was whoever he knew. But he would always say, I married this person this week, and I'd be really frustrated with my grandpa for leaving my perfectly wonderful grandma in the dust. And so anytime I hear someone use married as a verb, I think back to the many times I falsely accused my wonderful upstanding grandpa polyamory, and so it's a trigger.
I apologize, Nick. I apologize for bringing it up. So I have my mother to thank for really documenting our childhood across the board, but especially up here in Grand Lake. And I have her to thank for these photos that I have. I brought some. So some folks may remember the bumper boats. And so, when Nick and I would come up for summers, there are all of these things that are, like we were talking last night in advance of today, we just wanted to cover and make sure that we remembered all the things that we used to do up here. And there were things that we would do every single summer. They were just, we call them traditions. So bumper boats, we would always do. That's my grandma Rimple, Pat Rimple. Fishing. So does anyone remember Lou Dawes?
I do.
Yeah. So he was a really interesting guy and a bit of a loner. And I don't know how social he was or how connected he was in the community. And I actually just learned this summer that he used to fly fish with my grandpa and her dad. But he was Navajo from northern New Mexico. I don't remember exactly how he got up to Grand Lake. I just remember he'd always show up. He had this mid-length, like not long, but mid-length, kind of shaggy white hair. He always wore aviators and a shearling leather jacket. The story that I heard is that he was a pilot for the CIA. And he would just show up sometimes with fish. I don't even know if we knew that he was coming, but our door was always open to him. He'd help us get the Chris Craft in and out of the water at the beginning and into the summers. He was a remarkable craftsperson up at Shadowcliff. Our grandparents had these beautiful carved wooden doors. They did a lot of traveling, and they brought back these beautiful wooden doors from Mexico, and they didn't fit the door frame. And so they were trying to figure out, like, what do we do here? And they called Lou. This is a story, it might be apocryphal. And Peter and Karen, you may be able to confirm or deny. And Lou was like, well, I can do it. And he just came up, and I just learned this story this summer. And now I look at the door, and you can see that it's angled just slightly. And the craftsmanship is amazing. Like, you would never know that that kind of alteration was done. And so he's just a really interesting guy, and he just sort of disappeared one day. And we're not 100% sure what happened to him. There's a lot of lore around it. Did he fly one last mission for the CIA? Did he just go off into the mountains because he started feeling a little sickly? But he was a huge part of our childhood. He's just an iconic person. I remember going to his cabin once, and just inside, it was in the foyer, he had this huge, the whole room was this big model train set. The reason I brought him up, aside from the fact that he was a big part of my experience growing up in Grand Lake, is that I caught my first fish with him in the trout ponds right outside of town. So fishing. I never did fly fishing, but we did sometimes cast lines off the dock. Here's another fishing photo, that's my mom. Nick's trying to catch fish with his hands. I don't know if he was successful or not. So rodeos, right? So I think cowboy culture is still present in Grand Lake, but was a pretty big part of our childhood growing up. I wish I had that jacket still. And also, yeah, sombrero stables. We didn't have the one that you mentioned, Tim. That was gone by the time that we were growing up here. But sombrero stables, and that actually is a pivotal memory. Driving into Grand Lake, the first thing you got hit with was the smell of the stables. Yeah. And it was not a pleasant smell, but it was a familiar smell, and it meant that you were here. And so I have a sort of nostalgic, I miss that smell, even though I'm grateful that building is being used now. Yeah, all sorts of, we don't wash our clothes this way anymore, but those vests were pretty iconic. I threw this one in just because it's a great picture of my dad in a chef's hat. I'm not 100, this was not actually here in Grand Lake. So I'll just say a little bit about the other side of our family. So as I mentioned, our maternal grandparents were Pat and Warren Rimple, and they came up to Grand Lake for the first time in 1954. I believe they were living at the time in Manhattan, Kansas. Peter, is that true? Yeah. So they came up for the first time in 1954. They were invited by their friend Reverend Rogers, and he had a cabin that's now on the land that Shadowcliff is on. And they camped on the land, and there's a stone fire, this chimney that you can see in a photo on the second floor of Rimple Lodge at Shadowcliff. You can see the tent that they camped in. It was in 1956, the picture from 1956. But that chimney is still there, and that's where they cooked their food when they came up in the summers. It's not on Shadowcliff's property. It's across the line, the property line. But the chimney's still there. It's just kind of remarkable to me. You can also see that meadow there. If you ever go up to Shadowcliff and you see there's this meadow at the back end of our land. It was all lodgepole pines. And I can only imagine that all of those pines died in beetle kill, and it just came back as a meadow as opposed to a pine forest. But it's interesting to see some of these photos of a landscape that's very familiar to you, but it was very different at the time that the photograph was taken. Okay, so they camped for the first time. They fell in love with Grand Lake, as everyone who comes here does, as our great-grandfather did when he came up and decided to buy a cabin up here. And over the course of a couple years of coming up and camping, they nurtured this dream to build a family cabin for themselves. And then, if anybody's, how many, just by show of hands, how many people have been up to Shadowcliff? Okay, so that's like maybe 65% of the room? 64, I think so. So if you've been up there, you know the view is just stunning. Like, you can see the whole valley, you can see the lake, you can see the mountains. And in 1956, my grandfather was sitting up on what we call the point, which is the cliff part of Shadow Cliff, and had this stroke of inspiration that I think he would call divine. And he just felt to himself, we can't keep this place to ourselves. We want to build a place where other people can come and experience the feelings that we feel when we get to come up here. So he went to my grandmother and he said, I want to build a retreat center here. And so this blows my mind. He was 30 years old at the time. She was 27. And she said, let's do it. So they did. Over the course of the next 25 years, our count is that there were over 650 volunteers from 42 countries that participated in the building of Shadow Cliff, which is kind of remarkable. My grandfather was a campus minister, my grandfather was a VA, and my grandmother was a VA nurse. So they didn't have tons of money. So again, 25 years, volunteer labor, a lot of generosity. They were able to get the land from Patience Cairns Kemp and their friend Reverend Rogers. They just explained what they wanted to do. Patience believed in the vision and sold them the plots. And they built what now exists. There are 2 lodges, 3 cabins, and a historic chapel that is now used as a sort of multidisciplinary space. So this is a view from the deck of Rimple Lodge. On the left there is my grandfather Warren, on the right is my grandma Pat, and then Peter and Karen, who are here in the room with us tonight, and their 2 daughters, my cousins Ellie and Alana Rimple. Beautiful view, a beautiful family. That's my Uncle Scott's my mom's older brother, and he died of AIDS in 1989. And there's a cross on the point at the Shadow Cliff that's a memorial to him. I have one single memory of him when I was 3 years old, and he was on some experimental medication, and he wanted to travel. So we were in some sort of beach location, and he was lying on a couch, and he had this pink liquid and going into his arm and IV, and I was 3 years old. I had no consciousness of what was going on, and I was playing on the couch, and I knocked over this container of medication. It fell over, it spilled all over the floor. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was bad, that this is happening. And my mom came over, and she was, this is her brother, and so she was freaked out. She was trying to clean everything up. But the memory that I have of my uncle in that moment is that there was not a second frustration. It was just complete kindness and grace for your little boy. It was his nephew, and I just feel really profoundly grateful that at 3 years old, that was a memory that imprinted, and I have that memory of him. That's my grandparents with me and Nick. You can see in the background above my grandma's head is a bell tower. We ring that for the meal bells up at Shadow Cliff. So, coming up to Grand Lake for us was twofold. We got to stay at this beautiful lakeside cabin. We had this rich connection to our great-grandfather and the Thompson family. We had this, incredible grounds to run around on. And then we got to go up the hill and we got to see our maternal grandparents. And so to have both sides of our family present in Grand Lake was just a really special part of our childhood. And we didn't have to go multiple places. We came to one place, and a good chunk of our family was there. That's my grandma at the desk up at Shadow Cliff. My grandfather, that's at Trinity Church in the Pines. Just a stunning blue suit. And he had that turquoise cross was one he wore a lot. So Nick and I when we came up, we were involved at Trinity and would light the candles, amongst other things. We also Nick is going to talk about this a little bit too, but we also had this unique opportunity to the Thompson cabins were summer cabins. But because our grandfather was the minister at Trinity Church in the Pines, they lived in the manse, which was winter us. And so we got to come up for Thanksgiving and Christmas too, and be here in the wintertime. We sledded down that hill that's over by Trinity Church. I remember in the manse, we'd set up long tables with food down in the basement of the manse, and we'd eat upstairs. And so I also remember just parking myself in front of the heater at the big cabin. So even though it wasn't winterized, we would still go inside the building. And it was so cold, and I just sit in front of that big heater. Okay, so this is same outfits as before, but this time with my grandfather in the middle of Grand Ave. You can see Lone Eagle Lodge to the right there. Yeah, that's standard. The gas station is no longer there.
It's further down.
This also is not Grand Lake. There's a cute picture of my grandfather being there. So this is my grandmother, my mom. More cute photos of us in cowboy attire. So the golf course. So my grandmother was a big golfer, and she'd take us out. Nick and I were reminiscing last night. We remember like what are the things that were sort of iconic, and going to the golf course, hitting balls at the driving range, and then afterwards we'd always go to Dairy King, and we'd get root beer floats or banana splits, were kind of our two go-tos.
Got to straighten that left arm.
Yeah, my form is not great in this photo. So this is up at Shadowcliff. This is the chapel. These are, I believe were these the lodges chairs? Did we get these from the Grand Lake Lodge? Yeah. So we had those for a long time there. They're beautiful. Very difficult to store, but they're very beautiful. That's my dad and my mom. Okay, so just another story about both our childhood and our grandfather. So many of you will remember in the 90s there was a big debate about whether or not to allow gambling in Grand Lake. And I think there was a proposal to build a casino where the old mini golf place was in the center of town. And our grandfather was just up in arms about it. And he, being a sort of organizer and a man of principle, and just galvanized a lot of people to oppose it. And I remember painting these, so we got these cardboard boxes, and we spray painted them up in the shop up at Shadowcliff to look like dice. And let's see if I can get the cursor here. So that's me. And I think that might, no, maybe that's not you, Nick. I thought Nick was in this photograph. Maybe he's not. But we marched in, I think this is the Buffalo Barbecue Days Parade, carrying this sign, "Please don't gamble with our future." And I think the idea was that to have children carrying that sign because it was about the legacy of Grand Lake. And I think about what this place would be if it was a casino town. And we would not have had the experience we had as adolescents. I would not want this to necessarily be here. Like I'd come back and be building a new part of my life here. So I feel really grateful for the folks who really had an understanding of what the consequences of that would be and came together to oppose it. I know not everybody was necessarily on the same page about that particular issue. And then I'll just close with this picture of me and my brother, because to have Grand Lake be a part of our history, and you can see we're real good buddies in this photo, and we've remained good buddies throughout our lives, and we get to come together here in the mountains and spend time together in the summer and go out on the boat. It's interesting, Tim, I appreciate the last slide that you had in your presentation, because I think that, Nick and I reflected on this. We have a similar sort of relationship to one another that I think our dad and uncle have to one another, which is that Nick tends to be more of a lake person. He likes getting out on the lake, likes going to social events. I like going to social events too, but maybe different kinds of social events. And I'm more of a hiker. I'm more, I'm now running the Shadowcliff, this organization our grandparents founded in the 50s. And so we have a similar sort of love for this place, but it also has its particular timbre for each of us. And that feels like a real blessing because we can share our love of Grand Lake with one another. But it's not exactly the same. It's a sort of it's not a concentric circle, it's a Venn diagram. There's this area in the middle where there's overlap, and then there's areas where we have distinct interests and things that we really uniquely and personally appreciate about this place. So I'm going to hand the mic to my brother, and just share your reflections on it.
I'm going to allow a brief 3-minute intermission because I too have 481 slides to present. First, before I get into my reflections on Grand Lake, to just address the elephant in the room, my brother and I don't typically both have mustaches. Typically, one or the other, and for whatever reason, you got us on a night where we both have one. I think as the sort of mischievous and I'm not the youngest. Leslie was the youngest. Now Teddy, my 6-month daughter, who was going to be my grand finale, and now it's past her bedtime and she's sleeping. So I'm going to have to figure out how to land the plane without her. But I think what I really wanted to sort of spend some time talking about was just what it was like to be a kid in Grand Lake and what it still feels like, as I still feel like a kid in Grand Lake. But I think one was, was touched on across, the various parts that have already been presented, but just, it was the same drive every time, because we were coming from Kansas City, And again, for those of you that have not been on I-70, you can basically put a brick on your pedal and you'll wake up and you'll get to Colorado at some point. It's a straight line. There's not much you're going to see on the way. It's a horrible, horrible drive. Around Empire, we'd start screaming at our parents that we needed ice cream. They would tell us that we're about an hour and a half away from a town where there's more ice cream per capita than anywhere in the world. But we still needed to make sure we just had a little sweet treat, you know, to get us through that final stretch. But as soon as you would sort of round and see that welcome to Grand Lake sign, it's every single time, no matter how much the town has changed, no matter what year it was, no matter how old I was, that welcome to Grand Lake sign felt like I was home. That sort of veering right, knowing that we weren't going to the park, we're going to veer into Grand Lake. Every time, whether I was 4 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old, felt like I was coming home. And it was just this magical feeling knowing that while, you know, I had tons of friends that were going to summer camp or, you know, had their own sort of versions of how they'd spend their summers, you know, I got to come home every single summer and I got to be with people that I knew from summers before, whether it was from sailing school, whether it was from, you know, neighbors within the cove, whether it was from just people that are part of our grandparents' community or parents' community that always treated us as kids with the utmost kindness, the utmost respect, the utmost encouragement to explore and be kids and go out and get dirty. It just always felt like no matter what we were doing, it always felt like coming home. And so that was one piece that I loved. And then once you're here, you really get to be a kid. You get to play in the dirt and play in the water and find ways to sort of mash stuff together that kind of floats. It doesn't really float, but it kind of floats. And just try to get out on the water any way you can. You're building rafts, you're getting on inflatable rafts. Now I see the neighbors' kids, you know, they're tying together paddle boards and they're setting up these long, almost like for those of you that have ever seen like a Japanese game show where they have to run across without falling off, like a spinning log or something. They'll set up these games and you just see generation after generation exploring, using their imagination, being outside. I don't even think we had internet at our cabin until a handful of years ago when we started coming out for really the full summer, but it was always a place that we were completely unplugged. It was always a place that we were outside, and maybe we didn't get quite the same trust that my dad and his and my uncle did, but it kind of was a get out and be home by supper sort of world, which I didn't have back home. So that was the first thing I loved, was just this sense of safety, this sense of exploration, this sense of just being able to go out and have fun without a care in the world. I did not have a care in the world. I probably should have been more worried about bears, but I wasn't. I think that was the first thing. I think the second thing for me was, you know, to give some flowers to my dad and my uncle. You know, we were always so lucky because there's a lot of people that discovered Grand Lake around the same time that John and Loretta discovered Grand Lake that don't still have access to a house here, or don't still have access to a cabin. And sometimes you have to sell it, sometimes it's just difficult to share it across a family. There's a million reasons why sharing a property can be difficult. Everyone wants the same dates. You know, Grand Lake, everyone wants February 4th. Everyone wants to be in Grand Lake February 4th. I don't know why. But we've just been so lucky that the effort that's been made by my Uncle Tim and my dad to just always be a place that we're sort of hanging out together. It's never really a place that's we get this weekend and you get the other weekend. It's a place that I grew up with my cousins and we were hanging out and having fun together. I grew up with my brother. I grew up and I start to get emotional now as, again, my grand finale, my daughter Teddy, who's an incredibly cute baby, unbelievably cute, so squishy. But I just think about, you know, as the world, and this is where I'm a little bit of the guy on the lawn, but as the world gets more digital and people are sort of, you know, are the way that kids are interacting with the world is changing from even the way that I interacted and certainly the way my parents did. You know, I know that when she comes to Grand Lake and with her friends, they're just going to be out playing, and they're just going to be using their imagination, and they're just going to be building forts up near Shadow Cliff, which we did several times. If we do come during the winter, they will be sledding down that hill. They'll be doing the same stuff that we did and that generations before us did, and that we all think is ours. Every kid, I feel like up here, thinks they've discovered something, and sometimes you have, but that hill, we were like, oh, this is our sledding hill. And then we'd see 15 kids lining up with sleds, and we're like, oh, the word has gotten out on our secret. But I think, again, you'll find that little gazebo down by the water. You'll think it's your own fort, your own place to do things. And I, as someone that is not a particularly emotional person, now that I think about my daughter coming up here, being the 5th generation of Thompsons to explore Grand Lake, again, no matter how much it changes, the boardwalk's still going to be the boardwalk. The smell of the air is still going to be the smell of the air, sometimes smokier than others, but it's still going to be the smell of Grand Lake. You're still going to have the sense of community. My assumption is that she'll be going to Bob Scott's jewelry store for the next 30 years as I drain all of my savings on beautiful turquoise jewelry for her. But the final reflection for me is just that I feel really grateful that the effort that our family has made for this to be a family place and for it to be a place where we gather rather than separate. Again, it's just a place that I've always associated, being with my cousins, being with my family, and again, the fact that I will be able to give that same experience to my daughter and have her growing up here and have her hopefully learning how to sail from her skip and hopefully going out on hikes with her Granby. It's like this incalculable joy that I am filled with, and just knowing that these amazing summers await, these harsh but wonderful cozy winters await. We're just going to have this extraordinary time giving her a true childhood in a way that I think is increasingly rare these days. And I feel like others in my family have reflected just an immense gratitude that choices that were made almost 100 years ago by my family impact us so greatly to this day. And I think the final thing is we have a lot of luck that John Thompson was this kind of person of note with the piano books. I think not everyone knows a ton about their great-grandparents. And I think that we've been really lucky that sort of legacy of our family has been preserved, partly because he was this notable person, but also because he created this place that we're all deriving such immense joy from. And so, as others have sort of reflected, I feel immense gratitude. Alexander sort of alluded to this. Most people could probably tie this together. I don't think he explicitly said, our parents actually met in Grand Lake. So Alexander and I would not be here. That's fine, but Teddy would not be here if it weren't for Grand Lake, which is a terrible tragedy. So my final note is just one of immense gratitude. I think as we've all reflected, I just love this town. I can't believe I'll get to come here for the next however many years I'm alive. I feel just so much joy every time I'm here, and the community and the people that are here, and the memories that I've built and that we'll all continue to build as a community are ones that mean more to me than just about anything in my life. So I feel grateful to all of you for being interested in our family. I'm sorry my daughter's not here. I don't know how to end speaking without being like, hello! But anyway, I'll end on that note. We're really grateful. We appreciate all of you taking some interest in the family history, and are grateful to be a part of the community with all of you.
Well, that was fun. Do any of you have any questions for the Thompsons? Okay, Karen. Shenanigans.
To make Tim really nervous. Look at his face. Oh no. Okay. He's looking like, oh no, Karen's going to say something about how we grew up. But actually, one of my fondest memories, and I'd love for y'all to elaborate on it, our family would go over for pit stops at the barbecue pit continually, and the stables would let the horses loose. Would you talk about that, please?
Rustic stables, and do you all remember Rocky Garber? I just can't get Rocky Garber out of my mind. He was once mayor of Grand Lake. They used to run the horses right in front of our cabin over to the field to graze. And now it's going to throw back on the Fry family because Sissy Fry, who was Karen's sister, took it upon herself to ride bareback. So she went across the field where the horses would graze, and rode one of the horses and was caught, unfortunately. And I would like to say that since my sons admonished me for not talking about pranks, I would like to say one thing about my beloved father. They did have parties at the Grand Lake at one time, and there was alcohol. And there was a friend of my father's who was caught, I think the Latin is in flagrante delicto, which means they were spooning or some such. So this gentleman was otherwise occupied, and he was the bread delivery man for Grand Lake. So my father, beneficent as he was, took it upon himself to deliver the man's bread. Now, it wasn't in any prescribed fashion. Some people got 5 loaves, some people got half a loaf. But they were all surprised in the morning when they woke up. So there's the proof. Thank you.
Yeah, we've got a question back here.
Yeah, I was just wondering how the ownership of the cabin has been passed down. I mean, who owns it now? I mean,
Well,
it's part of the
it's
family.
currently set up in trust.
A trust.
So the Pioneering Trust, and that's the way we've got it set up. It moves along through our families. And you'll see a lot of properties around the lake are set up in trust. And just one really quick thing too on Leslie. I really didn't mention her in my presentation, so I feel really bad. She was a sailing school person. She's had friends up. She's been an incredible asset up here. I think you guys will agree. She's got her dog up here. We are having a ball, all of us together. She's in New York, so a long way away, and made the effort to come here with us this summer. And she's A+++. She just doesn't get in as much trouble as the rest of us.
Did you have a question?
Yeah. So my great-grandparents were here, and my great-grandmother helped found Trinity Church of Pines, Willa Davis. They started David Haven. My grandparents were married in David Haven in 1937. My parents met here in like the 60s. And I just feel like, I just wondered if you ever met anybody from David Haven or any of the employees or anything like that?
You worked at David Haven.
So, yeah, so my dad and mom met at David Haven. Hold on a second, I'll let him tell the story.
Okay.
So, I met the boy's mother at David Haven. I was a desk clerk, and I think I sold the most Kit Kat bars ever sold at David Haven. That we worked with Tom and Betty Sowell, and a few of them were just absolute delights to work. I mean, one of my best summers ever was working at David Haven, yeah. And the only problem was, I was at the front desk, and so my job was, if in the newlywed suite was in the building across the street, and it was on the 3rd floor. So my job is, I admitted people to the lodge. I just shuddered if I found that they were newlyweds, because I was in for a caravan. I would be a Sherpa and would be carrying their luggage, which was usually a big honeymoon crate, out to the 3rd floor of the Lake Lodge. But David Haven was a wonderful place, you know, spectacular.
One thing I neglected to mention about, so I'm on the board of the Rocky Mountain Repertoire Theater, which is, I'm very proud to be a part of that organization. And but there's also an interesting piece of family history, which is that, so originally there was the Thompson family, and no relation, in Grand Lake. They did theater, and then they moved themselves down to Colorado Springs. I can't imagine why they would go to Colorado Springs from Grand Lake, but they did. And the town missed having theater there. And my grandfather, having the K-State connection, having been the campus minister at K-State University, brought up acting students from K-State University. They stayed at Shadowcliff, they rehearsed in our chapel, and they performed at the Pinecone Inn before they moved into the community house, and now we have our wonderful theater in town. So I also feel very proud of that sort of family connection. Skelly and Judith Warren, who were former directors, were longtime Shadowcliff volunteers, on-site managers. Skelly was the chair of our board of directors, actually as recently as I think 2022 before he passed away. So I just wanted to mention that piece too. There's, you know, it's such a small community, and everybody knows each other, and which is like a beautiful thing. And we're all, I think there's a particular kind of pride in Grand Lake for the things that we do as a small community. Like the things that we have that are these sort of jewels, and some of these things have these long tails, like these long, both a long history, but have also sort of lasted and survived and grown and expanded or reimagined themselves. And so I like that little kind of nugget, and I wanted to make sure to share it, because it also feels like a special, one of the things about coming back to Grand Lake, I was in New York for 12 years, I reconnected with Grand Lake and Shadow for 2 years ago after I moved to Santa Fe, and it's been a really rich and beautiful experience to reconnect with this place that I have such love for in my heart. But one of the things that's been really a nice full circle moment is being invited to join first the advisory board and then the board of the Repertory Theater, and feel that sense of connection to its founding and now what it's grown into and become.
It's getting hot.
Well, what a wonderful evening. Let's give them a big applause.